Good morning. Hello, everyone. All right, I think we are live. Welcome to the stream. How's everyone going? Let me know if you can hear me and see me. And I think we are good to go. Hey, Khalil. How's it going? Hey, Neil. What am I working on today? To be honest, I have no idea. We're starting a new project or starting something new, so I'm not 100% sure what to do. Hey, Winston. Good to have you here. So I have a couple of ideas. I actually asked on Instagram yesterday what you guys wanted to see, what sort of tips, what sort of workflows. However, some of the answers that I got, they're basic. Oh, sorry, yeah. Some of the suggestions that I got are basically referring to things that I've done in the past. For example, if you're someone that answers something around the lines of fiber mesh or something like that, we did that a couple of streams ago. We did a bit of fiber mesh, so I'm not gonna repeat that. The idea is to keep things fresh and try new things. Other than that, I got a suggestion of doing some hard surface stuff, which I'm not the best at, so we might try that. But to be honest, I thought that the best, I have a couple of ideas. Let's see what you guys think. I want to create kind of like a stylized sculpture, but like a digital sculpture of what it could be a real sculpture, something that could be in a gallery, very stylized and simple, and then just work on the surface details of that sculpt. Let me see if I can give you an example. Hey, Mr. Sanson, how's it going? So I don't know if you've seen this one around my social media. This little goat. So this one is very cartoonish, it's very simple, but it's a cartoon style. I want to create something similar but less cartoon, a little bit more stylized or abstract. I'm not sure if you know what I mean, but that's one of the options, and just to try something new, something different. Otherwise, we'll just go for the usual creature alien stuff. But it's really up to you guys. It's just that some of the answers that I got when I asked what you guys want to see are topics that I've covered already in the past. Well, it's bug in the video. I'm not sure what you mean. Bug in the video. Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean. Is the video there's lagging or something? Hey, Comics Legend. Cool. Yeah, so we might do that. I don't think it's too complex what I'm thinking of doing. It's more about just sculpting and some techniques on sculpting, and maybe I get to show you some how to make custom VDMs or custom brushes for it. We'll see what happens. So I don't think we're gonna have to sculpt it for 2 streams. I'm pretty sure that the simplicity of it can be tackled in one stream. No lag on YouTube. Sorry, my bad. All right, no worries. Cool. Or maybe you were referring to the bug as in the in the goat that I was showing on the video. Maybe that was I came late to the joke. I don't know. All right. Coffee done. Let's go ahead and get started. All right. So it's hard to explain what exactly I'm going for. So I might as well just start working, and then you'll see it. Once you start seeing it, you might have an idea. But again, it's a very stylized, simple, very minimalistic type of sculpture. Alrighty, so I'm gonna go ahead and start. I think I'm gonna go for a kind of like a fox or an animal that is similar, because I did a fox similar to the goat, but I don't know, it didn't have too much personality, so I want to create something different along the lines of that fox. So I'm going to start with a cylinder. Click Make Polymesh 3D, and I'm going to start shaping that cylinder into kind of like the height of the sculpture. I guess you can think about what I'm going to, or what I'm trying to do, more on the along the lines of a jewelry type of thing. So very stylized, very simple. It could work well with a just a single material like iron, or I don't know, maybe it could be something that we can take into Substance Painter. All right. So with this cylinder, what I'll do is I'm gonna plan the sculpture, and I'm gonna plan the overall structure and the curvature. So I'm thinking of making kind of like a fox that is, when the fox kind of like sit and have the tail around the legs and that sort of thing, but I want to do it in a stylized fashion. I mean, I know that what I'm saying sounds very abstract, but let's give it a go. I'm going to turn this into a Dynamesh cylinder. I think we have way too much resolution in this case, so I'm going to scale everything down a bit, almost to half, and reDynamesh. So now we have something a bit better to start working on the block out. Alright, I'm going to turn polyframe off, and I'm going to take my standard brush, and actually I have a brush just for that. So this is a brush that I use to paint, and is very similar to the standard brush. It just has some extra settings that makes it really sharp and easy to draw. So I'm going to use this to do a quick draw of what I'm planning to do with this cylinder. So let's say, alright, this is kind of like the fear of the black canvas. I don't know, the blank canvas. I don't know what to start with this one. Let's try starting here. So this is gonna be kind of like the tail. Right, so if that's the tail, I want the head to be kind of, maybe I'll do that. Around there. So that means the body is gonna be there. Again, this looks super abstract, and it's gonna be hard to understand exactly what I'm doing until I start actually pulling geometry out. Again, this is just a quick reference for me to have an idea of how the proportions work. It might not mean much to you guys because, again, it's still in my head, and it's hard to explain what I'm going for. Alright, so with that in mind, let's go ahead and mask out some areas. So I'm going to use the normal masking pen. And what I'll do is I'm just going to target these areas. Hopefully once I mask out these parts, it's going to be more obvious what I'm trying to do. And once I extrude all these parts. And the reason I chose a cylinder is not for anything in particular, just because I think it's going to be easier to see the curvature, but that's pretty much it. Alright. Cool, so that's, let's turn off poly paint, and this is a rough outline of the shape that I want. Let's go ahead and extrude that, or create a its own subtool. So I'm going to use extract to extract just the mask region. I'm going to try the default settings. I think this one is a little bit too thin. So let's crank that up to 0.1. Extract. I think that's alright. Let's just go ahead and accept that. And I'm going to keep the cylinder as a reference, but I'm going to work on this. So this, if you can, I'm just going to pull this out really quickly so that you get an idea of what I'm doing. So this is the fox, and here you're going to have the face, roughly speaking. So it's going to be very simplified, very minimal type of thing. Hopefully you know what I mean right now. Let's have a look at the chat. Cool. Mr. Samson, how about a caricature as you did in Pink Floyd? Yeah, that one might take a little while, or might take longer than this. That was a project that evolved over time. Hey Daha Nifer, how you doing? All right. So yeah, hopefully you have a better idea of what I mean right now. Now this is, it has its own polygroups, its own set of polygroups, and so we can take advantage of that. Let's see if I can isolate that one. Right, so that's kind of like the internal polygroup. I'm gonna give it a different one just to have a different color, so you guys can see that it's different. So we have 3 polygroups here. What I'll do is I'm just going to polish everything, but I'm gonna polish by groups. So polishing by groups, which for you guys should be on the deformation palette, should maintain the sharpness of. So whenever there is a difference between polygroup, it should maintain that sharpness and polish the rest. So polish by groups, you'll see it just simplifies again the shape. Just gonna run that process a couple of times. Perfect. So that looks a bit cleaner. And let's go ahead and maintaining those polygroups, I'm gonna run Dynamesh. So the polygroups I'm gonna keep there are not for anything special, other than being able to select areas and keep some areas protected when I'm sculpting. But for the time being, I think this will work fine. So what I'll do is bring in my Morph Brush, which I already had selected, and I'm going to turn on AccuCurve, which for you guys should be under the curve sub palette, under the brush palette. Yep. So this is the AccuCurve, and I'm going to use this brush to give it a bit of volume for the head. Actually, you know what? I'm going to bring in another subtool. So I'm going to append a sphere, and this is the one that I'm going to use for the head. So I'm going to go for a big head or a small head. I'm not sure yet. I guess that's one of the reasons it's good to keep them separately. Let's go for something, like that, and then we can just tweak it. So this is going to be the head of the fox, and I'm going to turn on symmetry, and like I said, it's going to be very stylized. So let's go ahead and Dynamesh that. And I'm just going to pull to create the nose, and using the smooth brush to simplify the shapes a bit. And I think one of the characteristics of the fox is that they have they look as if they have a very wide face. So something like that. And of course, the very characteristic type of ears that they have. So I think just by doing that, you get an idea roughly of what this animal is. So it could be a fox, it could be maybe a wolf. Let's just do a redynamesh here. Alright, so I think that's that's as far as I want to go with the head at this point of the blockout. But having it like that, it gives me an idea of where I want to place it or how I want to position it. So I'm going to rotate it a little bit. And because I mean, at this point, I don't have an exact idea of where I want to place this the head, but because this is kind of like well, the head is symmetrical, whereas the body is not. I want to keep the head where it is so that I can work symmetrically if I wanted to. And instead, what I'll do is I'll just move the body to, to suit the shape that I want. Okay. Maybe that neck is a little bit off. Cool. So that is roughly, hopefully you can see a little bit better what I'm trying to do now. It's kind of like a fox. Obviously we're gonna work on the body and give it some legs and everything, but it's gonna be something like an abstract thing that if you were to print it, it could sit nicely as a decoration type of thing on a table or something like that. So that's the idea. Comics line, it could always be a ring design. It could if I were to just leave it like that, maybe I'll be a little bit uncomfortable with the head now, but for sure. Hey Bjorn, Razor Eliminator, how can I download your brushes for free? Well, the ones that are free, you can just click on them and download them in the ZBrush guides. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and continue with the shaping the body a little bit. Like what I like to do, which is, if I have something that I kind of like at a stage like this, I will create a new folder, call it OR as originals, and just keep that as a reference. I'm actually gonna put the cylinder there. Alright, so I'm gonna take this duplicate, and I think maybe what I can do is isolate the inside, holding Control and Shift, mask it, invert the selection, invert the mask. So basically using the polygroups, like I said, just as a selection tool. And I'm just going to start smoothing this out and maybe pushing it out, just to create a little bit of volume, or maybe even with the clay brush at this point would be fine. So I just want to simplify this shape or smooth out the shape, but also add some volume. So what I'm thinking is that this kind of edge of the cylinder that we extruded could be the main one of the legs, and I'm just adding some volume for the body. And one of the legs at the back, which could be here. So this one is going to be the one that gives most volume to the inside of the cylinder, as well as the tail. So like I mentioned, this is this is going to be more about the sculpting side of things and deciding where things go. Kind of like designing as you sculpt, which is pretty fun. I mean, it's fun to sculpt. I don't know how interesting it is to watch, but I'm I'm gonna give you some tips and some techniques that I use when I'm dealing with these type of projects. And I think we can do something like a VDM, or create some VDMs for stylized fur or stylized hair to add later on. So we'll see how we go. Alright, I'm going to clear the mask, and I'm going to go ahead and refine this border already. So I'm going to start with a simple smooth. Now that I have a little bit more volume. And I'm not too worried about the sharpness at the bottom, because after we can just flatten everything using one of the deformers. I just want to concentrate on the shapes and the volume. And this area, I think this is going to be the difficult part, like the tail and the leg. This very narrow area just to sculpt, but it's not too bad. So far, I mean, if you want to follow along, all we've done is use primitives to block out everything, block out the shape, and then we use masking tools to extrude the areas that we want to keep. And all I'm doing now, well, aside of the move brush, all I'm doing is adding a bit of volume with the clay brush. Alright, so I mean, I think this is looking alright. Let's take the head and see what difference makes making it larger. So obviously, if you make the head large, I think it immediately feels a bit more like a cute type of character. Like it's on the cuter side, whereas if you make it smaller, it seems a little bit more stylized. I'm not sure which one I should go for. That's why I kept it separately, so that I can, manipulate it very easily, like so. Let's just undo that and keep it like that for the time being. But I'm sure I change it at the end, and just changing the size will change, like I said, the how you perceive the sculpture, with this more cute or more kind of like a designer type of stuff. So I'm gonna select the clay brush again. Oh, have it selected, and just refine this bit. And I think what I'll do here is just create a gap for this area, for the to work on the hands. So to do that, we can create a specific polygroup. So let's see, maybe from this angle it would be better. So this is an interesting technique that you can use as well. So I'm going to use the select lasso, hold Control and Shift, and I'm just going to isolate this, right? I'm going to invert that selection, and maybe a little bit more, actually. Just want to grab enough geometry so that it's very easy to see the difference. Alright, so obviously this gap we need to fill it, so I'm going to invert that selection again, and I'm going to hide this bit, and that sort of like gives me a rough idea, or a better idea, of what is the gap that I'm going to actually delete. And I think maybe a little bit more on this side, so let's go ahead and invert that selection, and maybe this is better. And I'm also going to hide a little bit of this portion here, basically just refining the selection. So far I haven't deleted anything. It's just selecting the areas that I need to get rid of. Yeah, I think this one is gonna work. So what I'll do is, again, I'm gonna duplicate this and chuck it into the originals just in case. And I'm gonna take this one and I'm gonna delete hidden. So I'm gonna turn on my polyframe so you'll see what happens maybe a little bit easier. So I'm gonna delete hidden. So now I don't have anything hidden. This is actually an open geometry. And what we can do is run Dynamesh again, and Dynamesh is going to close these holes. So control click and drag if it's a Dynamesh object, which is not. So let's enable Dynamesh first, and you'll see it closes these gaps. I mean, it sort of like curved this a little bit, which is not a problem in this case. If you wanted to make it very, very sharp, you could just use maybe the, I don't know what else we could use. We can try close holes, but I'm afraid that's gonna be worse. It's actually better. So closing holes gives you a sharper. It's gonna try to close the areas that are close together, if that makes sense. So it's gonna try to maintain a little bit more of that shape rather than Dynameshing it. However, if you, let me just undo that. So at least we know that the closed holes looks or works better in this case than Dynamesh. But if you increase the Dynamesh resolution, it probably gives you a better result. So I'm gonna increase it to 600. No, still similar. So I'm gonna keep it simple. 128, that's what I had, and I'm gonna close holes. So closing holes, it gives you this, and then you can run the Dynamesh process again, and it makes everything a little bit more uniform. So let's turn this off now, the polyframe, and I'm gonna smooth out these areas. Alright, so if this is going to be the leg, right now it looks very uncomfortable. It's kind of like backwards. So let's just tweak that a little bit with the Move brush. And I think I want to go for a very, very thin leg. So I'm going to smooth this quite a bit. Alright, and this is going to be kind of like the right leg. If you're looking at it from, from whatever angle you're looking at it, it's going to be the right leg. Alright, I'm going to do a quick save. See if you guys have any questions so far. All good. Hey, Brihesh, I don't know if that's how you pronounce Brihesh Sinha. Comics Legend, Control Shift and Alt to take away. Control Shift and Alt to take away. Yes. I'm not sure what you mean. Maybe I didn't see that until right now, so I'm not sure what part you're referring to. Control Shift and Alt. But yeah, so this is the. Hopefully at this point you can see a bit more clear what I'm trying to do. So I'm not gonna make it super obvious exactly what this is, as in, you know, make the paw or the, maybe this is not too bad, but I don't want to make it super obvious. I want to keep it very abstract and simple. Maybe I should be looking at some anatomy reference for foxes or or a dog or something, which I don't currently have, but you know, I want to keep it simple. Just make sure that the proportions are okay. All right. So for the next, for the other leg, I think what I like to do is maybe do something like he's kind of like curious in a way, or just give it a bit more of expression just with the pose. So let's see how that plays out. Just gonna smooth the kind of like the chest, which is at the moment very thin, but I think that goes with the with the character. So I'm gonna select this, or maybe isolate it. So I'm gonna duplicate the entire body, hold Control and Shift, and select just the leg. I'm gonna turn the other one off for the time being. So this is just the leg. Maybe hide a little bit more of that. Delete hidden, close holes, redynamesh. This is the same process that we did before for the when we close that gap. And this is just to generate a a piece that looks similar to the other leg, and we can use that to position that in a different place. So it could be something like that, right? So we can have two legs like this, and that's an option. So and this is part of like what I like to do when I'm designing things as I go with now references or anything. I just end up with a bunch of different subtools. They all have different ways to affect the overall composition of the character or whatever I'm doing in ZBrush. So right now this is an option, having these legs like that. I'm just gonna duplicate it and hide it, and this one is going to be more what I mentioned at the beginning that I wanted to go for. So maybe something like that, and then I'm gonna mask this. Right, so the idea here is that I'm just bending the leg. And then we can use the Move brush to sort of sort it out in terms of how it plays out with the rest of the body. So you'll see I have these two options now just because I have it in different subtools, whether I go for that or this one. So this one is kind of like a simple version. I think this one has a bit more character. Well, it gives more character to this fox, right? I mean, you can disagree with me obviously, but I think it looks more interesting. But if you think about it, if he's just sitting down and he's kind of like relaxed with the tail like that, it makes more sense to have it like this. I just think this looks more interesting. Maybe it creates a bit of tension, like the fox is about to shoot off because he saw you or something. I always try to put in some story behind whatever I'm working on, and that helps me to inform the kind of like the artistic decisions that I make, or yeah, just gives a bit of reasoning behind of what I'm doing if I add a little bit of the story. You know what I'll do is I'm just gonna do a quick check on some references for anatomy of a fox if I can find something, just because although this is very stylized, I want to have an idea roughly of how that looks. So okay, so I think we're in the right track. It's gonna show you an image if I find an image. Alright, so I just chuck it into a pure ref, right? So I think we're on the right track. This is kind of like what I'm going for. Maybe this part of the leg is too long, but yeah, I think it's very similar to, if not the same as the anatomy of a wolf or a dog anyway. So that's cool. All right. If you guys have any questions so far or any suggestions for this design, feel free to chuck it in the chat. There's not going to be much of a tip and trick or tips and tricks today, or at least at this point where I'm just blocking it out. But we'll get to do some VDMs in just a second. All right. So I think we're okay in terms of the proportions. Just gonna make this a little bit more embedded. And use the gizmo to sort of reposition it. Just want to make sure that it's turned off perspective. Just want to make sure that if you see at this guy from the front, there's not a very uncomfortable tangent, because the whole idea is just to create something simple that it's kind of like easy to look at. If you look at it from the front and the tip of the front leg is kind of like almost touching the tail, although it is not really touching it, but from this angle you can see it's almost touching it. That affects the overall composition. It creates a little bit of tension at this point, so I'm just gonna avoid that just by rotating it a little bit. So just creating that little gap really helps. Alright, so I'm gonna keep the leg separately just while I tweak the rest of the body, and then we can just merge everything together. Just add a bit of belly here. And I'm not entirely sure if I want to define this other leg, the back leg, like that. Maybe. I kind of like the simplicity of this curve here, so I don't want to break that apart. So instead, what I can do is just maybe give it some little legs here at the back, and for that we can use just a couple of spheres. So I'm gonna, or not spheres, I'm gonna append a cylinder. So cylinder, and I'm gonna rotate that at 90 degrees. And this is going to be the leg here for the foot of the character. And I'm gonna use a flatten deformer. So I'm gonna click on the cog icon here. Oh, why is it not doing it? I wanna dynamation. Shouldn't affect anything, but you know, just to be sure, flatten, and just pushing this cone up should flatten everything a little bit. Cool. Let's go to dynamesh this, and I'm gonna use the smooth brush to smooth everything, and maybe with the move brush as well. It's gonna pull this out a bit just to give it more of a curvature here. And we can also we can either use the move brush to put everything in place, but we can also use a deformer, the taper deformer, just to give it a bit of shape. So let's see it from the front, or from the top really. I can just push this out like so, and very quickly we have something that resembles the shape of the foot of this character. Alright, so I'm gonna bring in the gizmo and I'll try to position this maybe from the bottom. It's easier, obviously smaller. I'm just gonna change the size next to this other leg, just to keep a little bit of that proportion. And just from the bottom we can easily see well, I can easily maintain this curvature of this cylindrical shape of the fox. Okay, so that's probably one. Let's do the other one. So just duplicate that one. Alright, so let's have a look and see how everything is looking. Maybe a little bit further, and I'm just thinking that this blob here for the back leg is a little bit too big. Alright, I'm gonna take this one and just refine the shape a little bit, and in fact I just wanna push it forward a bit more. Cool. Now with the second one, for this one here, just selecting the body, I'm just gonna push that up a bit so that it makes more sense, like the bending of the knee, which is around here, and then just push this down. So those are just refinements in terms of the proportions, really. I think the blockout is done, and we can start refining it. But like I said, I want to keep this, the shapes and everything very minimal, very simple. I don't want to make it hyper realistic or anything. It's just going to be like a little piece that maybe printing it out would be interesting. Let's bring in the damp standard brush, and I'm just going to refine this line in here a little bit more, because it's kind of like the only part that really makes a kind of like a real bending of the body, or the bending of the body is more obvious in here. So let's just accentuate that and use the clay brush. Maybe go into solo mode to refine the chest and the belly of this fox. Just add more volume. Alright, cool. So I think everything is working. Let's just play with the head a little bit. So just placing, I mean, one of the main features of any character obviously is the face or the head. So you're drawn to see the face first. So just by playing with the position of the head and the size and maybe the angle, that would change completely how you read the character. So if I push it up a little bit and then just push the neck as well, it immediately make it a little bit more stylized, kind of like more elegant. If I push it down, it feels more like quirky, right? Just by positioning the head. Even if I just rotate it a little bit, without symmetry, you can see that it's kind of like more curious, more innocent. So maybe this is something that I want to go for. But again, it's just by rotating the head and changing the position and the size. So it's really powerful just by having this as a separate subtool. You can play with the design quite a bit. In fact, we can just try this like so, and just by doing that, it makes it more intentional, that pose, kind of like he's aware that someone is watching it. I don't know. Those are the type of things that I think about when I'm designing in 3D. So that could be an interesting one. So let's just undo that, and let's go ahead and go into solo mode. And I'm just going to work on the shape of the head just to fine tune it a little bit and design it a little bit more. I'm going to increase the dynamics resolution, and I'm going to bring in my clay brush. So let me see the chat, by the way. have it closed here. When you were hiding the parts to create the leg, right? Yeah. So Control and Shift to access the selection tools, and not Alt, just Control and Shift to select whatever you want to hide, and then invert the selection and then delete whatever is invisible at that time. Hey Emilio, how you doing? Yilman, hey Pablo, what did you study and what did you study to become a sculptor? As I didn't study sculpture. I studied digital animation and 3D animation back in Central America. When I came to Australia about 10 years ago, I also studied interactive media and I did a master in animation 3D. So by trade, I'm more of an animator, but I sort of like fell into the more concept art, and I was always more into the conceptual part and creating the worlds and the characters and the idea of what something could be, rather than the whole art of animating, which is very 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 hard. I think it's very impressive, but because I have a trade as an animator, so I started as an animator. I think that really helps me to understand certain things in the sculpting world, which is what I like to do now, or what I do now really, because of when you're an animator, you have to consider motion and how the bodies move and where the weights are placed, how the characters are posed, and to basically act a scene, right? So just by having that understanding of how bodies move, or studying that, although it's not just a sculpture, it's not just about the technicality of sculpting. I think I can translate a lot of the things that I already learned into from animation into the sculpting, just understanding the volumes and the way that the audience will perceive that acting, and all I'm doing really is just the same process when I was animating, but this time I'm just taking a single frame and try to make it the key shot or the key frame that makes it very appealing, and it's almost like an illustration that people will remember from that animation. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think I think people that start as an animator and then become sculptor or become more acquainted with sculpting tools, they have a lot of understanding of that sort of movement and how the body mechanics work and those sort of things. So I think that really helps. But it's not that I'm a sculptor by trade. I didn't study sculpting. That's something that I just sort of that I just started to become more interested in, and it sort of played out well because that's now what I do. I do still teach a little bit of animation in at university, but it's not the main thing that I do. Are you working on any particular 2D concept for this, Fox? Not really. No, this is just I'm just making it up as I go. I do have some references of the type of thing that I wanted to go for, but they're not necessarily of a fox. They're more reference of the style and the maybe the surface that I want to go for, like the detail, the level of detail, not necessarily the fox. I'm just going for a fox because I did it at the beginning of the stream. I showed the what's the name, the goat. I'll show you in a second. And that goat was kind of like a design that I did for a series, and one of the characters, one of the animals in the series was a little fox. And although I like him, it's not very appealing. As in, it's nothing out of the ordinary, to be honest. So I just wanted to recreate him in a different way. I guess that's the best way to put it. Alright, I'm going to bring the clay brush. add a bit of volume here, but I want to make sure that I keep all these shapes very clean. I don't want to overdo it. So the eyes are going to be just a couple of spheres there, but I'll do that later. Let's bring in the Move brush and refine this a bit. I guess one of the things that I want to maintain is the very geometrical shape. So it's almost like a diamond type of shape. So I want to respect these lines from what it suggests to be the ear and this fluff of hair for the cheeks. The same way from the cheeks to the bottom of the head. So that's what I'm trying to maintain here. Alright, I'm going to bring in the damp standard brush, and pressing Alt, I'm just going to refine the edges here. And this is something that I would do for any hard surface model. So if I don't work with hard surfaces as much as I'd like to, but and I'm not the greatest sculptor in that regard. But I do have a few techniques that I think are working, or that I think that work. So one of them is this one. I use the damp standard brush with the Alt key, like so, to sort of like marking those areas that I want to make a very clear distinction in terms of the angle, and then bring in the H polish. At this point I have not a lot of resolution to be able to see it properly, but this technique allows you to maintain a very clean, very clear angle of action. So just by doing that, you'll see, hopefully you can see it, just by adding a little bit of a line there with the damp standard brush, it helps ZBrush to respect or to understand what the main difference in the angles are, and that way you can create a very, very sharp and stylized sculpture, kind of like a hard surface. So the same thing here. For example, I wanna not using all just the normal effect of the brush. I'm just gonna push that in like so, right? So those are just kind of defining lines of the planes, and I'm gonna use this with the H polish to simplify these shapes. So you get a little bit of an angle there. Hopefully you can see what I mean. All right. Just gonna refine that bit. And this point is, is very simple, but you can already tell, or I think you can tell already, that this is kind of like a fox or a wolf. I don't know, something along the lines of a fox. I'm gonna make the nose very, very thin. I wanna try that. I think that works, and I'm gonna use the same tool or the same subtool for the eyes as well as the nose. So we can go ahead and append. Let's get out of solo mode and append a sphere, and let's go ahead and scale that down. Let's do a quick save just in case. Scale it down. So let's leave it there. It's not gonna be like that, but let's leave it there. And I'm gonna duplicate it and set the eyes for this guy. Right, so I think that works in terms of the position of the eye. The eyes are something else that I would, spend some time and pay attention for the overall composition. Let's turn the nose off because it bothers me at this point how it looks. But the eyes are very important. So depending on where you place them, they're gonna change the expression and and the look and feel of this guy. So if I put them closer together and make them, just to give you an example, if the eyes are kind of like big and closer together, let's just do a quick, no. If they're closer together, then they look more like a little puppy or something, again, cute in a way. Whereas if you make them smaller and maybe more spread apart, they give a completely different feeling. So I'm just gonna go for something in between, not too small but not too big. And remember that this is not probably the final size of the head, so once we move and change the head, the eyes are actually going to change size as well, proportionally, I mean. Alright, so I think that's good. Let's mirror and weld. So we have the two eyes on this fox. So starting to look a little bit more interesting. We have to define the leg and the body a little bit more. Let's bring in the nose and fix it, because I don't want it to look like a reindeer. I'm gonna activate symmetry for this one, and just using the move brush, just gonna push it down. From the top, alright, so I think that's looking better. We'll come back if we need to, but I think it looks alright. And I would argue that this is already the blockout, and we are ready to move on and keep refining the sculpture, and maybe do a bit of retopology and start adding details. So I'm gonna save this. Yeah. If you guys have any questions about what we've done so far, please let me know in the chat. And this is a quick sketch at this point, but I wanna keep the sculpture side of things very clean, very simple. Maybe we can work on some surface noise or some stylized kind of like hairs that we can do with VDMs, and then the rest is just gonna be handled outside of ZBrush. So for now, I'm gonna keep it simple. Jared Price. Alright, already answered that question. I mean, in a particular concept. No, this is a made-up concept as I go. For some reason, I can see you chipping away at marble. Yeah, that's kind of like what I like to do with ZBrush. That's how I like to treat it. But I've never actually done the marble thing. I think that would be really hard. Hey Ross Baxter Art. How you going? Daisy, what tablet do you use? I use a Cintiq 24-inch touch. Cintiq, yeah, I think it's called just that. A Cintiq 24-inch touchscreen. A Wacom Cintiq, just to be precise. Alright, so let's go ahead and continue. But before that, let me just give me 2 seconds. I'm gonna bring in some water because I'm getting thirsty. I'll be back in just a second. All right, and we're back. And do you use ZBrush Core or Classic? I use ZBrush Classic. Well, yeah, the original, the full version of ZBrush. For what I'm doing right now, you could totally use ZBrush Core, by the way. I'm using the core the core tools in ZBrush, so you could do the same thing that I'm doing here with ZBrush, the ZBrush Core. Okay, so let's go ahead and work on the leg, because this is clearly the one that stands out from the rest. So what I'll do is go into solo mode, and I'm gonna dynamesh this so that we maybe with a bit more resolution. Okay, and smooth everything out a little bit with not too much pressure. There we go. And we can bring in, already have it, the Morph Brush with the Aki curve, and just refine the shapes a bit. So this is just Morph Brush, right? Nothing else, nothing fancy. Well, you could say it's fancy because I'm using the Morph Brush with the Aki curve, but to be honest, that's kind of like my default Morph Brush. I use it with Aki curve 90% of the time. Alright, so that looks alright. Let's go ahead and maybe push this out a bit more. Alright, something like that. And I'm gonna select the body and use the clay brush to refine the chest a little bit more. Just to add a bit more volume, that's all. But I want to keep the line here cleaner and make the neck a little bit thinner as well. Alright, so I'm not sure if the head size is working. I might change it. I'm still kind of like trying to decide what the best move would be. But I think I'm just close to just merge these with the rest. Alright, so let's have a look at what we can do with the head in terms of size. Or maybe we can just leave it for the end, because it's better to do the retopology in this symmetrical fashion and then play around with it. Maybe I'm still trying to decide what the best approach would be. Alright, so what else do we have to do at this point? We have to merge these little pieces of geometry with the rest of the body. So maybe let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to duplicate those ones, send it to the originals, duplicate, send it to the originals, duplicate the body, send it to the originals. So now I can take that one and merge these three down. So I'm going to select the body, merge down, click OK, merge again down, click OK. So now these are a single mesh. We can try merging the other leg as well. So duplicate, send it to the original, so we have everything twice, just in case. And I'm going to merge that down as well. Alright, and we should have different polygroups anyway. What I'll do is I'm going to hold Control and Shift to select the selection brushes, and I'm going to select all these polygroups for this leg, and I'm going to create a single polygroup so that it's easy to select it. Even after I merge everything and Dynamesh, you can keep polygroups, and I'm going to do the same thing for the rest. So I'm going to hide everything except the body, give it a single polygroup. So now we have 4 different polygroups, and we can go ahead and Dynamesh maybe with a higher resolution, and we keep all these polygroups. So this is one way to go about it. I'm going to show you 2. So let's say you want to redynamesh with a high resolution, Control click and drag, and ZBrush is going to Dynamesh everything, so we can go ahead and smooth this out like so. But if we wanted to work, for example, on this area that looks a little bit tricky, we can hold Control and Shift, select that arm, invert the selection, and just work on this area, or you can mask out areas. So this is a great workflow just to be able to work with this type of close pieces of geometry that are very close, just by dynameshing but keeping the polygroups. So I can do the same thing here. For instance, just hide this one, invert, and work on this area just because I have the polygroups, but I'm just gonna smooth this out. Again, I don't want to have very harsh lines. I want to keep everything very smooth. Alright, I'm going to bring in the clay brush. For some reason, I think I lost my... Every time, every stream we have some weird thing happening. Last stream was the tablet stopped working. This stream, my keys in my remote control are not bringing the palettes that I use most of the time. So let's go for the clay brush, clay buildup, not clay brush, just to add more volume here. Now that we have everything as a single mesh. I'm gonna hide this leg and just work on this area. Alright, so I think this is working good. We can maybe smooth out the tail a little bit just to get rid of this kind of like the pixelation bits of the geometry before we increase the Dynamesh resolution. So just smooth everything out a bit. I'm gonna do a quick save. Alright, so I'm gonna have a look at it from the bottom, and you'll see we kind of like maintain this cylindrical shape, which is what I wanted from the beginning. So everything is almost contained within a cylinder, and that sort of helps with the composition of the character in itself. Right, so let's go ahead and think about, well, before we merge everything and try to do a more of an interesting pose, what I'll try to do, what I want to do is maybe the VDMs and just show you something different, or a different part of the process that you can use. So I'm going to do a quick save. Maybe the fox ears can be bigger, maybe. Yeah, I think if the entire body and the legs were longer and more stylized and thinner, the longer ears might go well with them. Let's just try that. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. but because I'm not sure if it is that, maybe a little bit in between. Yeah, that's kind of cool. That's a good suggestion, Comics Legend. Maybe not too much. All right. Julie's art. Hey Pablo, just want to say that watching you really helped me grow and serious artist. Oh, thanks so much, man. Glad you like what I share. Thanks for always. No worries, man. I'm glad that you like the tips and the things that I share. There's something that bothers me about this sculpture, which is basically the neck and the transition of the neck to the head. That's what bothers me the most at this point. So I can either just try to fix it right now, or wait until the retopology or the series measure really. But I think the most annoying thing is just that transition between the neck and the head. So if I take the head and push that down a bit, that helps a little bit. And let's just refine the head a bit. Sorry, the neck. But I feel the neck is a little bit too long, especially, you know, in comparison to what the shoulders are. So let's go ahead and what did we say was? Oh yeah, so we're gonna work on the VDMs. So let's leave this one as it is for the time being. So this is a good blockout. It's already kind of like smooth and polished. We can come back to it later, but at least you have an idea of what this is, or how it looks like, what it is, right? So let's do the VDMs. So the VDMs are fun because you can take advantage of the XYZ kind of like directions. It's not just an alpha, it's actually displacing the geometry. So I'm going to create one for stylized hair, or a couple of them. So let's go ahead and select a plane 3D, turn that into a polymesh 3D, and obviously we need quite a bit of geometry in order to define the areas that we want. So I'm going to turn on polyframe so you can see what I'm going to do. And I'm going to turn off this subdivide smooth slider, which for you guys should be under the geometry divider, is next to the divide button. And what this does is prevent ZBrush smoothing these edges. So it doesn't allow ZBrush to smooth kind of like the corners. So if I'm just going to show you. If I enable this and I click divide, you'll see the corners. It creates that little smoothing just because of the smoothing algorithm. So I'm gonna invert that, or not invert, sorry, undo that. Turn this off, and then I can divide that. So I have more resolution now. In order to see the changes once you have polyframe, you have to turn it on, off, and then turn it back on, so you can see what is happening. I'm going to divide it a couple more times, and then we can use, I don't know, something like the damn standard brush to see if we have enough resolution. I think we have enough, maybe one more time. So subdivide it one more time. So now we have 263,000 points. So yeah, this is probably a good starting point. We can also bring in the clay build-up. Yeah, I think we have a good starting point. All right. So the idea here, or the trick, is to sculpt everything that you want within the plane, or within the boundaries of this plane, and you cannot use anything that will destroy or change the geometry of the plane. So you cannot dynamesh, you cannot cut and subdivide things differently from the simple subdivision approach. Yeah, that's essentially it. As long as you don't change the underlying geometry, you're good to go. So I'm going to start creating some stylized fur or hair by simply masking an area. So I'm going to select the mask lasso. and do something like that. Maybe that's too fat. Let's just make it thinner. Alright, something like that. I'm gonna invert that selection, or that masking selection, and I'm actually going to remove this sort of like pointy bit of the hair, of the stylized hair, just by covering it with a mask. And the reason I want to do that is because that point, or that section of the hair, is going to be actually part of the VDM, so it's going to be displaced. It's not going to be part of this extrusion, if you would. I mean, you cannot extrude it, by the way, but that's an easy way to understand it. So now that I have this, I'm going to bring in the Move Brush, or the Gizmo. I'm going to position this pivot by holding Alt and moving it, just repositioning it a little bit like so, and maybe we can just use the rotation to push it up like that, right? So that already has a little bit of volume, and again, this is not this is the great part about VDMs, that you can just play around with the 3 axes, so it's not only based on the camera that is going to be displayed, or based on a single alpha with height information. So I'm going to push the Y, or scale it in the Y axis a bit. So if this was just an alpha, you can get this shape, but here, hopefully you can see it here in this gap, it will be filled with polygons. It's just gonna push them, either push them in or push them out. But with a VDM, we can displace the geometry really nicely. All right, I'm gonna reduce the subdivision level, and I'm gonna use the smooth brush to soften this a bit, because again, we cannot use the Dynamesh. We have to rely on the geometry that we have with the subdivision approach. Julius, do you usually have backface mask on when you create this? Not at all. In this case, it's not gonna affect anything unless I start working on this area that has some polygons behind it. But generally speaking, I don't. Only when I'm using, if you're working, I guess maybe an easy way to put it is, I only use backface masking, or I mostly use backface masking when I'm working on a very thin area that has thickness. This one is just a flat plane, so it doesn't affect much. But if I were to just work on this area here, thin, but it has thickness, that's when the backface masking really shines. Laggy here for me. All right. So this is like the initial shape of the hair. Let's go ahead and bring in the Move Brush. I'm just gonna make it a little bit more pointy. So this is what I meant about having the little flick of hair as a displacement rather than just hide information. Alright, so I think that's good in terms of the shape that I want. But I'm going to bring in the inflate brush and just give it a bit more volume. Alright, now we can do we can stylize this a little bit more if we wanted to. We can bring in the damp standard brush, for instance. Hold the Alt key, hold the Alt key to invert the effect, and then just make a few lines just to suggest kind of like a clump of hair, but a stylized clump of hair. Speaking of hair, if you guys have been following the process of the brushes that I'm going to share soon, it's almost ready. I'm just completing a little tutorial that goes along with the brushes, kind of like a reference video guide, and it should be ready this week actually. I think I'm finished with the testing. Everything seems to be working fine. They seem to be doing what I want them to be doing, and they're basically a series of brushes that I've been using for a while now for fiber mesh that I found to be really helpful. So I just tweak them and polish them in a way just so that they're useful for everyone else. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll show you in a second. But they're basically grooming brushes for fiber mesh that gives you a lot of control. Alright, so this is sculpting of this little hair. Maybe I'm spending too much time in here, and it's not going to be that obvious. But you can spend as much time creating your VDMs and making them as detailed as you want it. And I think because I want to keep things very clean, I'm not going to add too much details. I think this one is pretty decent in terms of the size. But once I have this, I can go ahead and create even more complex pieces of hair and then just apply those. Right? So let's go ahead and clear the mask, and I'm going to refine a bit the edges. And if you are working on this VDM, right, and you have a lot of polygons, because you can keep subdividing this, just keep in mind, so two things. One is if you're using the smooth brush with a lot of subdivision, you might want to change to the smooth strong so that it's faster. And the second thing, let's just clear this up a little bit and simplify these edges. And the second thing is that you could have millions of polygons in this plane to create the shape of this VDM. But if you apply the VDM to a geometry that doesn't have enough polygons to describe the same shape, it's not going to look as sharp, or it's not going to look as good. So when I'm creating this type of brushes or VDMs, I tend to keep it relatively low. Let's say 250,000 is kind of like a good starting point, because those are brushes that, again, it will depend on the geometry that you're applying it to. And I'll mention what I mean in just a second. That makes more sense when I actually do it. Alright, I think I'm happy with this VDM. Very simple, but it will be useful. So what I'll do is I'm going to change to a brush that might give us a good result. We can do it with a standard brush, but I think the Chisel Brush might be good. So the Chisel Brush already has some of these VDMs. So the Chisel Brush works with VDM. So that might be a good one. You know what? Let's keep it simple, and we just tweak it a little bit using the standard brush. So this is why not having my custom palette makes it really slow. Just gonna select the standard brush, and I'm gonna clone it. Oh, by the way, what I was referring to about the grooming brushes, in case you haven't following it along or haven't seen it, are these brushes. So they are like custom brushes for fiber mesh, and they give you a lot of control, and it helps you simplify the grooming process, so it doesn't it's not as frustrating as you might encounter with the standard brushes, or the ones that come with ZBrush, because they're not frustrating as in if you use them they're not useful or they're useless. They're actually pretty good. It's just that they require a different workflow, a little bit more of a thoroughly planned pre-process, whereas this one you can just create a fiber mesh and achieve a good result. Just is more intuitive, I guess that's what I'm trying to say, the way that they work. So anyway, that's outside of the scoping of this session. But if you wanna have a look at those and you're part of my email list, you will receive an email basically with the link to those. Alrighty. So to create a VDM, once I have the plane, it's actually very simple. I just clone the standard brush, so that I don't destroy the original or override the original. And I'm gonna go to the brush palette, and here under the create, not create, sorry. Oh yeah, create. No, it's right on top of the create. I haven't done this for a while. So this button here, it says from mesh. So if I click from mesh, it should give me a VDM. That's all there is, right? So now I can tweak, let's say, the stroke and the alpha. No, let's just work with the stroke. So I'm going to change the stroke to drag rect, obviously. Click and drag. So this is what I'm getting, and you cannot see properly this piece of hair, and that is because, again, I just duplicated the standard brush, so we have to tweak the actual brush. I'm going to increase the C intensity to 100%, and now we have something that works much better. Now, what I mentioned about having a more complex VDM once you have the basic one, like the basic piece of hair, is that I already have that as a brush. I can just go ahead and do this type of thing, and then create, three pieces of hair. This is destroying this part a little bit, so let's go ahead and undo that. What I like to do is just go back in time or reduce my undo history to a point where I had the plane with subdivision and no masking. So we already extracted the piece that we wanted for the brush, so we can now go ahead and do something a little bit more complex, like that. Right? And you can tweak it as much as you want. So if I like this one, I can just go ahead and do the same thing, brush from mesh, and now we have, in the same brush, we have two different VDMs that we can use. So let me undo that. I'm going to select that one and create something even more complex. And bring the other one just to fine tune it. Right? If you wanted to. I mean, I'll probably spend more time making sure that they interlock nicely, but just to give you an idea. I'm not going to use these ones anyway for the from mesh. So now we have three VDMs. Let's undo all that. And now we can just apply this VDM the way that we want it to. Now, we can go ahead and do something else, which, let's see if this works. I'm going to bring in the layer brush. So I'm going to select layer, and no, it's not going to work. Let's bring in the brush first, and I'm going to draw this again so that we have something in this VDM or in this plane. And now I'm going to select the layer brush, right? And in the layer brush, clone it. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to create a VDM. And the reason I select the layer brush is because the layer brush has properties that are different from other brushes, so we can play with the morph target. So the idea with the morph target, let's go ahead and undo that. So now let's tweak the layer brush. Right, so now the layer brush is behaving in the same way as the other VDM, but the difference is that we can use the store morph target. Hopefully this is gonna work. Haven't tried it with VDMs. Yep, it works perfectly fine. Cool. So you'll see, because I store a morph target using the layer brush, the properties of this brush in combination with the morph target, it allows you to place these VDMs, but respecting the surface that is being stored in the morph target. So if I use the other brush, you won't be able to do what I'm going to do. So I'm going to just show you with the layer brush. So I can just drag it from here, and you'll see there's no deformation around this area. I'm just basically drawing it on top. Maybe this one is not right. Right, so you can create these overlapping pieces really nicely, and then you can just smooth a little bit of the transition there. But that's because I'm using the layer brush. And now I can bring in, click on from mesh, and now I have this more complex one. Let's undo that, and I can take that one and then do another one on top, like that. Right, so this is not looking kind of like a hair anymore. It's almost like some scales for a dragon, but you know what I mean. So I'm gonna do a something that looks more like a fur or like a stylized fur. So I'm gonna start with some little bits and pieces here, changing the size a bit. I'm doing a slightly bigger here. Right. So that's the beauty of working with the layer brush as well as the Morph Target. So I'm going to click on from mesh. So now I have 3. Let's just do one more, just so we have more variation. I want to try something that I haven't tried, but let's see if it works. I haven't tried this, but I'm gonna give it a go and see if it works. Basically, if I drag this one, you'll see it has a curvature, sort of like in this fashion. But if I wanna variate the VDM a little bit more and have like the opposite direction of the curve, what I'm gonna try, and I don't know if this is gonna work, is rotate the plane around and do it from the other side, but holding the Alt key. So that if I turn around, nope. Let's try it. I don't think it's gonna work, but we give it a go. No, it's not gonna work. We can simply just create a new one. So I can just do this, right? And then I can mirror the entire thing. We can remove the subdivision level. We don't want to keep them anymore. Mirror, and then do the same thing. Brush, create from mesh. So now I have these two with kind of like 2 different angles. I'm gonna undo that. So now I can do something a little bit more interesting by dragging this one, then dragging the other one. And just by doing that, it creates a more of a variation, I guess. Alright, so smooth out these transitions a little bit. Brush from mesh, and now I have this VDM, which maybe I can just save that so that I can use it later. Call it Fur VDM. For VDM, it's not letting me save. What am I doing? Fur VDM. Oh, I'm just open a brush. Save as instead of. Yep, let's call that layer 2. Alright, so now we have this simple brush out of VDM, so we can go back to our little animal and we can start using that brush. So I'm going to start with this simple one, and I'm going to show you what I meant about the having enough resolution to describe the shape or describe the details that we created in the VDM. So right now this piece has, you know, a fair bit amount of geometry. So it has 300,000. In a way, is very similar to the total amount that we had in the VDM. So if we were to add this detail to the entire body, like a massive piece of hair, it might be the same. But because we're just gonna target specific areas, let's say just this area here, then the amount of polygons or the amount of points that will be in this area are gonna be very small. So you'll see that the shape of this fur or this piece of hair is not gonna be as well defined. So you see it has, I mean, you can see the polygons, right? But anyway, that's just what I wanted to mention. I think I'm gonna use these ones mostly around the chest and the tail. To be honest, like I said, I wanna keep everything clean. So I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to store a morph target, right? So we can use we can take advantage of this brush being a layer brush, and I'm going to create a new layer so that we can, you know, modulate the influence. So I'm gonna take the first one and then start pushing it like that, and you'll see, oops, this is one of the problems. I think, I don't know if this is going to make any difference. Let's see. Auto masking, Blackface Masking. Yeah, so I can't remember who asked this. Maybe Julius Art. In this point, because I'm using a VDM, it's actually stronger than an alpha in this case because of the displacement of the polygons. So using the backface masking, it allows you to, you know, keep everything, like in this case, keep only one side affected, right? So I don't want to make it that strong. Maybe swap to this one. And just by doing that, you'll see it just generates some variation that is pretty interesting. And like I said, I only want to do it around the tail, with kind of like large pieces towards the end. Alright, and I'm just gonna smooth out some areas. I'm not particularly happy with these ones here, so I'm just gonna reduce them a bit. And let's try these other ones around there. Alright. Cool. So I think that's that makes it a little bit more interesting already. Just add a bit of contrast between the detailed areas and the more simplified curves and areas of rest. We can add a few more around here. It's kind of like where the mesh, it's not the mesh, the fur will sort of break apart a little bit from the body. And these little pieces of hair also have their own mini action line, if that makes any sense. So they also help me to define that line. So in this case, you'll see the ones that I use, it has that very subtle curve in this way, whereas if I use this other one like that, it's just gonna break that line of action, which might be what you want, but I think just keeping everything maybe on this side is not too bad. So that, I think that works well. And let's just drop a few more here, kind of like on the chest area. A few of these. No, that's too much. Maybe that and a couple more. Another one here just to break this silhouette a little bit, or the line here. Alright, and I think in terms of the details that I wanted to add with this VDM, that's enough. Or yeah, I think that's enough for what I wanted to do. It's even more than what I was planning, and it's kind of like I'm not entirely sure that this is what I want, but because we saved a Morph Target and we have a layer, I'll show you what we can do about it. There is something else, maybe around there. I want to add a few more. So, and I'm seeing some chat activity. I'll just check in just a second. Let me just finish up with this, these bits and pieces. Okay. So I think that's fine. I'm gonna do the same thing with the head. So I'm gonna select the head, and again, store Morph Target, create a new layer, and I'm going to get rid of symmetry. I wanna break out the symmetry in this case. But the head needs quite a bit of geometry. So if I use the VDMs, it's very evident the resolution. So I'm gonna increase that quite a bit. Sorry. Let's clear the layer, delete the Morph Target, and Dynamesh it. So now we have more resolution. Store Morph Target, create a new layer. All right. So that gives us more resolution to do this. I think that's what I wanted to do. All right. Now, because we have the layer and the morph target, we can come back and, you know, redefine this whole thing, or let's say go back to the body, and I don't want that much influence of these. I don't want the geometry to push out that much. I can just reduce everything at once with the layer. So that's the ability that we have by using layers. I'm gonna leave it at 1 for the time being, because then I'm gonna show you something else. Cool. So I'm gonna do a quick save and see if you guys have any questions so far. I think we have about 15 minutes, so I reckon we just do a quick pass just to polish everything. But you know, it's a good progress for a single session. I'm quite happy with the result, and maybe next stream we can just finalize it and do a bit of retopology. Mr. Sanson, very nice technique. You fooled me again. This project is too simple. It's very simple. When you add these little techniques, that actually happens a lot to me when I start a project, and sometimes I try to make something more complex than what it really is. But if you break down everything kind of like in steps, you can create very complex project with very simple techniques. And to be fair, that's what I set up in my course, The Extra Mile. Some of my students are doing like incredible work, and it's more like the progress that I can see, because it's like a sequential, a very systematic approach of creating something complex out of a very simple set of steps. Sometimes you start with something that looks very simple, but if you stick to the project and you work and progress on developing that idea, it becomes more complex. And sometimes complexity doesn't necessarily mean that it's gonna look better, right? Sometimes less is more. But yeah, so sometimes if you wanna replicate something that looks very complex in ZBrush, the best way to approach it is by starting with very simple shapes, very simple blockouts, and then bit by bit you will be constructing the complexity to get to that level. This is super helpful. Cool. Glad it makes sense. Excellent. So with this VDM, this saved. Sorry. So with this VDM, so will this VDM be saved the next time you open ZBrush, or do you have to make something in order to make sure it's safe to use the next time? So VDM, V as in VDM, vector displacement map, is like a brush. So you can create a VDM that has a few of these VDMs, a few of these hairs, for example, and then you just need to save it as a brush. So under the brush palette, just click Save As, and it will save with all of these VDMs, right? So you can have multiple VDMs. In fact, well, I mean, one thing that you need to keep in mind is that each one of these VDMs is an actual plane with, you know, almost 250,000 points, right? So it's not an alpha, it's not an image that is black and white, it's actual geometry. So when you save a VDM that has that many points with these many planes, it's gonna be quite big, or quite the size of the brush is probably in the gigabytes, because what you're doing is creating a brush that contains geometry, right? It's not based on an alpha. I'm gonna show you an example of that. Because I have some custom brushes that I use with VDMs. Just to give you an idea, so I have these rocks, this rock pack. There is this one called the Cave Concept Kit, and all of these ones are VDMs. But this brush is about 2.5 gigs. It's pretty big. So I'm gonna load it just to show you. So even loading the brush takes a little while. So see all of these ones? So I have quite a few brushes here, and these are all VDMs. So I'm going to show you what they do and why they're cool. So if I go to a plane 3D, make it polymesh, and let's go ahead and subdivide it a few times. I can use these brushes to generate rocks really quickly. So I can take that one, click and drag, you know, and create this sort of thing very quickly. But it's the amount of details is coming from this plane. So having a lot of these planes, this brush makes it it's a really big or really heavy brush. But you can do things like, it doesn't have to be sticking out or like in positive, the positive geometry can also be negative. So you can do, you know, a cave, a couple of caves really quickly, or other type of tunnels and caves, more stylized rocks. So this is already looking very complex, but it's the same geometry. So if I take my plane and reduce it, this is the low poly, right? So you could potentially just take this and project the details to create normal maps and create this based on this low poly. That is the idea. But it's a heavy brush, so just be aware of that. That if you save your VDM is gonna be, if you have a lot of these ones with a lot of polygons, it's gonna be quite heavy. What about the last project, the rocks and the gate? Can you show the end result? Yeah. I haven't, I mean, I didn't follow it up. I just did a quick, let's see what it is. To be honest, I just did a quick, what's the name? A quick render in Keyshot with some alternatives. So I'll just show you what I have in here. So these are like 3 concepts that I did in Keyshot from the last project. So I think someone mentioned when I asked what you guys wanted to see in this stream about environment. So if you're interested in environment, last 2 streams were about building this environment. So these are 3 options, like camera angles. I quite like the one on the right. The lighting and the focal point is quite interesting. It also has this nice diagonal line that divides the light area with the dark area. So I kind of like this one, but I don't know if I'm gonna pursue this any further than this. I literally took what we did in last stream, brought it into Keyshot, and play around with the materials and the light a little bit just to create this. But that's all. I think I'm gonna leave it there. That's it. Cool. So I have about 10 minutes. If you guys have, I think I'm going to leave it there, guys, in terms of the techniques. Maybe I'll show you something else, just so that if you're following along, you can play around with that. Because we have layers, right? I selected the body because we have layers, and we have the morph target stored. Actually, I need to move things around here so you can see it. Oh, by the way, if you didn't know about this cool technique, this is something that's really cool. So you notice in some parts of my UI, I have sort of like empty spaces, like in this area here, and I leave those spaces intentionally so that I can hold Control and click those spaces and move it around. So I can hold Control, click, and move this thing around. And the reason I do that is because if I open the other palette, you'll see some of the tools that I have in my UI sort of get hidden by the other tray, sorry. So I can hold Control and rotate it, or not rotate it, hold Control and click and move these things. And you can do that anywhere in the UI. So that's what I did at the bottom. So anyway, just a little tip. So yeah, so now that I have the morph target, I can go ahead and select the morph brush and just tweak these shapes. Obviously I cannot do it because I need to create another layer, right? And I can just go ahead and use the morph target to go back in time in a way and refine the shapes a little bit more. So with the morph target, you can more gradually reduce the size of these flicks of hair in a way. So for example, maybe this one is too strong, so I can just get rid of 1 instead of 3 and just keep the rest as they are. Same here. Whoops. I don't know what I did there. I think I did an undo what I shouldn't. Oh no. I have no idea what I did and I wrecked it. What? No, I don't know what I did. I'm just gonna switch back. Right, I have no idea what I clicked, so I don't know how I should go back. I'm gonna try to fix this. First, let's have a look and see if a quick save can save us a lot of let's just risk it. Oof, that was close. I have no idea what I did, to be honest, so I cannot tell you how to fix it. Anyway, what I was saying is that with the Morph Target you can create a new layer and refine these bits and pieces with more control. But be careful, because I think if you go, I don't know what I did. I don't know what I did, and I don't know why I destroyed it. But anyway, I'm going to do a quick render. Of this guy, just to wrap up today's stream. Hopefully you found some of the techniques. I mean, I know it's very simple and you know, kind of like a quick intro to how I would sculpt something that is asymmetrical, maybe, like the body at least. So yeah, hopefully you found it useful. Let's see if there is some last minute questions. We have about 5 minutes, and I'm happy to answer those. Hey Pablo, nice stream. I know that your training is closed now, but if you can and don't mind, what is the ballpark number? Not need to be precise if you don't want to get any of what open again, and I can afford it. So the extra mile, you're referring to the extra mile, the course that I have, a 3D concept artist. So if you go to the 3dconceptartist.com, everything is in there, and there is a kind of like a part at the bottom where you can. It's not a, what is it? I forgot the word. A subscription part where you can subscribe there, put your email, and once the course is ready, you can. I'll let you know so that you can enroll. At the moment, it's closed because I'm focusing on the current students just to help them out provide support during the first stage of the course. So I'm just fully committed to those students that are already joined. But when I open it again, I'm thinking maybe around October. I'm not entirely sure when. I'm just, again, it's a ballpark of the time. But again, it will depend on how my current students progress, because there are different stages. Cool. Is this a ZBrush environment? I think Creature Brush, you're referring to the image that I showed, the orange image. Yes, that's a ZBrush environment. I just use the ZBrush to Chisel Brush to create that render or that concept. And this one is also this is convenient. This is one of mine as well. This is a using the NPR filters, the one that is currently on save on the screensaver. So I use ZBrush to create that, and then use the NPR filters to create that comic look. If you hold Alt using the Morph Brush, does it bring back what was there before? Not sure what that means. You mean after I destroyed it? Maybe I didn't try that, but maybe I haven't. I'm not sure if that's the case. What's the next live stream topic? Caricature, maybe. Maybe. I think we can just finish this guy up, or we can start something new, completely different. Maybe we haven't done creatures for a while, or actually maybe I can use that as another way to show you some of the brushes that I'm going to be releasing hopefully this week, which are just fiber mesh brushes. How about those fiber mesh experiments you did on your Instagram? yeah, so let me just save this and I'll wrap it up with this because it's kind of cool. I'm gonna save that as the fox. Cool. So now that I save this project, I'm gonna show you. Where do I have it? Right now I'm working in like 5 or 6 projects at the same time, and my desktop on the other side of the screen is an absolute mess. Alright, so let's have a look at the one, maybe this one. Right, so what Mr. Sanson is talking about these projects that I've been testing, the brushes that I'm going to release this week, hopefully, for fiber mesh. So another thing that I'm going to add as a part of the bonus of the pack is all the projects of the tests that I've done, all the projects with the settings. So I'm going to open up one so you can see. I'm just going to double click it, and Siri's going to ask me, project has been changed, would you like to save changes? No. And it will just give you this immediately. Just going to increase the size so you can see a little bit better. So these are like little planes where I test the brushes. So let's get closer. Right, so again, simple planes, but it has everything. So those are part of the deal with the brushes, is like they come with these projects. So the project has all the BPR settings and all the fiber mesh settings, so you can just explore how I created this. So if I do a BPR, you'll see the effect of the final image that I actually shared in social media. And also this one comes with the materials that I use, so specific material for this type of hair. So I have the camera on top, so let me just move this on the side so you can see a little bit better. Let's do another BPR render. So it comes with so I'm finalizing the pack, like I said, but it comes with 15 of these custom projects as a bonus thing. So you'll see this is all fiber mesh. The render is straight from ZBrush, but because I'm sharing the project, you can have a look at the render settings, how the shadow is I tweak the shadow. It has some NPR filters, so I use 3 filters in this case to brighten up everything, tweak things for the hair itself, so you can explore the different things. Every project comes with different settings. And you can also see the actual fibers and the original mesh, right? So this kind of look is achieved with the brushes. I mean the grooming of the brushes just makes it really simple to create all of these patterns. But because it is a project, it already comes with the settings. So if I select the base and I'm going to solo mode, let me just change the brush. So you'll see the material as well is a specific custom material, which is this custom hair material that has a bit of an isotropic specular. But what I was going to say is this is kind of like the quick poly paint that I did, but you can go to the fiber mesh subpalette, selecting the original plane, and you can click preview, and it gives you the exactly same settings that I use for for this. And that's it. So that's what you were referring to, I hope. So it comes with all these, and those are the brushes that I'm gonna be sharing. Cool. All right. I'm gonna leave it here, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will be letting you know if you're part of the of my email list. I will let you know and send you the link when it's ready. Otherwise, I'll put it in my social media if you wanna have a look at it. Other than that, I'll see you next time. In fact, let me just check the schedule. So next time, 27, 28. I think next week is gonna be different. It's different from today, from a Tuesday. But I'll let you guys know I'm gonna check with Kyle and at Pixelogic, and I'll get back to you. I'll share on social media when the next stream is, and we'll do something different. All right. So take it easy, guys, and thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time. Cheers.